Welcome to the Uncharted Way podcast, where we dive deep into the profound stories of ordinary individuals navigating their destinies in ways society seldom allows. And in this space, we explore the courageous journeys of those who have defied societal and cultural norms, forging paths that not only feel fucking fulfilling, but challenge the very fabric of our daily expectations. So today we have my dear friend, Danny Parizek, who is a spiritual practitioner, fucking light being that has come into my life. And I just am so grateful to have you on here and just chat and blow people's minds.
Thank you, Sari. How cool is what you just introduced is like, it's so resonant with me and it's so necessary. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So I was thinking this morning about where our chat might go, and could be so many different places, as I feel like you and I go on tangents regularly. But what I was thinking about was there's been a lot of this story that's been coming up for me lately of how I love. And you're always such a face I think about when it comes to love. And from the first retreat I ever attended, I had a Dr. Joe week long, and I saw your face and how loving it was and how loving your energy was. And every time I'd pass you, there'd be a smile. There would just be like an open arms. And then at every other retreat that you were at, that I saw you at, same feeling. And like that being the embodiment that you live in, and how loving it is to receive on my end, but then also to decide for myself that like that is the embodiment I want to be as well. And in a world where that energy isn't like the dominant when you walk outside your house and or at the grocery store, like how do you teach someone to be, well, maybe not teach is the right word, but how can you suggest perhaps someone who's maybe listening that like wants to love, but maybe isn't even sure how to start embodying more of those things in their life?
It's a super simple question to answer, and it's also very profound in its unfoldment. So what I would make suggestions in around love is that we always have an awareness in our heart space, always, no matter what, whether we're talking, whether we're walking, whether we're all of that. It truly is allowing myself to have an awareness as I'm speaking to you right now, knowing that there's a radiation that's coming off of my heart electromagnetic field that centers in my heart. So, and we must allow our mind to find that energy in our heart. And that's where a lot of people get stuck or they forget often, because it's so natural, especially in the Western world, to be up in our head, figuring
Right.
things out in the doing of things. And really, the being of things is always here. And this is where I find, all the teachers and the teacher that we came in contact with, Dr. Joe, teaches us so well. He's super scientific. And so his teaching can get pretty heady. And yet every meditation, every invitation, once he sort of lays people's mind at ease, he's always here. And so this has been it's my nature. Even in the midst of all the darkness I had way in my past, it just has become much more conscious and ease filled as I continue to just let my mind find my heart and let
Mm,
that feeling tone be present even when I'm speaking to you right now.
yeah, I love that. And that's like even like we've all turned in, well, not all of us, but the majority has turned into like human doings versus human beings, right? And like where would you say that that level of love that you get to be in like ultimately started becoming part of the norm, and like what had to be let go of or walked through in order to start being in that?
I love that question. It's so loaded. I could go like, this is where
Yeah,
we're going to
let's do it.
go.
Okay.
And I'm so grateful. So what comes to mind, first of all, there was many, many years, younger years of growing up a certain way. And I'm just going to say it, Catholic. And it just never resonated. So I walked away from it thinking, I don't belong in this, but I was never searching. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
then as soon as I landed where I'm a spiritual practitioner, a licensed spiritual practitioner, it's called Agape International Spiritual Center out of Los Angeles under the direction of Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith. And when I landed at his sanctuary and he's up on the pulpit and I'm sitting way in the back going, I'm not sure what this is, and having a whole bunch of doors closed from the truth of who I am. And he spoke truth that said, I'm an original idea. I'm not an original sin. I am love
Mm,
incarnate. I am God wants to see itself through my eyes. Those are just some of the things that he was saying that day. But that day, it pierced all of my veils, all of my beliefs. And then I got curious. I got really curious around, okay, so I feel really good. And back then, that was a high. I was like,
mm,
oh, this is the high I've been chasing, even when I was doing things that I thought I was doing to get high,
yeah.
right? The chemicalization that would happen. And then I go into this truth teaching and I keep getting pierced in this heart space of truth, 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 truth. And then it took a second for my mind to start accepting it and believing it and practicing it. And so that was the opening of the door. And then what I love about Agape, which is also online now, that opportunities came in. So they have this annual thing called Revelation. And my very first revelation was the two other teachers that I have chosen to follow, Dr. Joe Dispenza, which is where we met, and
Yeah.
Dr. Sue Morter. So these three teachers have given me little aspects that has allowed me to be in a recipe of love, and it allows me, the teaching is also allowing me to sit on a growing edge. That's my realization. I am always growing and unfolding. And I'm at this part of my life where I'm unlearning more than I'm learning. Like I'm
So
letting
true.
go of things that no longer serve to bring something magnificent into my life, whether it's manifestations or just mystical experiences. It's this and the truth teachings that I've been involved in that has allowed me to feel aligned with spirit. I hope that answers the question. And there's so much more. There's
Yeah.
so
And I want to touch back too on like the place of like being high, right? Like where it seems as if it's been easier for people to fall into a chemical to create what's missing versus going within ourselves to find that high, right? That you were talking about. And sometimes it's even falling into those chemicals that actually bring us back to who we are. That's part of the process. It's part of the journey, and it's not necessarily wrong. But perhaps somebody listening that hasn't fallen into those chemicals, but maybe isn't experiencing love in that way, in this highness, in this expansiveness, in this ecstasy, this freedom, this joy in their life. And the rest of the world is falling into a chemical, to be open and to be available to receive and to be love is a whole nother factor. And I feel like it's one that just people don't jump to. That's not their, oh, well, let me just open my heart and I'll receive the same sort of feeling. Right. And like to me, that is ultimately the uncharted way that people don't really experience because we're all stuck on the same fucking map versus willing to veer off and to recalculate into who you are and who you want to become and what you are, what you're learning versus, well, Susie's getting high over here and she's escaping from the feelings she's having, so I might as well do it too. And a lot of that obviously can be community and that's just not a feeling that I feel like is generally the one that you're exposed to and seeing.
Mm.
And so even like maybe in your story, like looking back, what ultimately changed for you to be in this spiritual center
Well, you already
to move
touched
you
on
in
it.
through that door?
Yeah, you already touched on it. It was such an outside journey, like needing to fit into this community. All of the identities I chose to put on, I needed to feel like I needed to be a part of. And then when I started turning and looking inward and going, okay, what resonates? Because I've learned, what resonance feels like. I've learned about the laws of the universe, which are all embedded in all the great texts, including the Bible, but they're just underneath all the stories. So when we go within, we stop attaching to what's outside. Yet our society is geared for that. And if we look at it from a bigger perspective, we have all chosen to be here thinking we're separate.
Right.
Right? So it's sort of a fun game that we're playing here if we can let it not be as serious, right?
Yeah.
And what I do know, the hero's journey, right? It's all about self-discovery and all that stuff. And at some point, everyone is going to get to the point where whatever they've been doing doesn't feel good. And that something is going to push them into something greater. And it's themselves. It's
Yeah.
themselves. And I want to throw a little bit of hope here because, yeah, we are watching a bunch of society, but I also want you to know that like the news outlets are not our friend.
Right.
Movies are not necessarily our friend unless we sit there and we're really
As the
conscious
observer.
around it. Say that
Yeah.
again?
As the observer,
Yeah.
just observing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I
Unattached.
want I want to interject some good news is like you and I are having a conversation around what it is to wake up. The younger kids are calling it I'm woke. And I mean, I'm loving it. And there is that wokeness is a forever kind of unfoldment. We're never going to get there.
Right.
Right. And what I can say with my own life, I lived a very uncomfortable, egoic, do, fit in, fit in, fit in, fit in. It got so bad it was codependent in my nature, meaning I needed other people to tell me I was okay, to a place of I'm listening to spirit. I'm letting the energy, which is also spirit, same name, different words. I'm listening to the energy that's running within that allows me to move every moment by moment by moment with authority, in love, at peace.
Yeah.
And when that doesn't happen, I know I'm a little off and I'm willing to just one breath, one conscious breath can shift everything.
Yeah. Well, and two, even like going into that like codependency. And I was also very codependent in my anxiety ridden body that was in the past. And, ultimately we think that it gives us some sort of control. And that's what we hold on to so fucking tight is like this idea that we have it all fucking together if we stay in this situation. And in reality, what I personally learned was when I surrendered, it was more I've ever been in control because those old ideas of control, anxiety, things like that actually didn't have a hold on me anymore. And it was me feeling freedom and my control in that. It's like the same idea as to why people stay in, you know, abusive relationships because they think that like they know what's going to happen. They have control because they know how this person's going to act versus knowing what it feels like to have true love within your heart. Authentic, centered, balanced, true love.
There's a lot of layers that you're talking about there too, right? Like people get addicted to the relationships that aren't serving because in their physiology, what they're familiar with gets created, right? So when you're in that fight or flight or like in that non-loving relationship, you are allowing yourself to create chemicals that are addictive. And so when we say enough of that, and we know that we can go someplace else just by the words, I'm interested in a loving relationship, we
Mm.
still have to walk through our addictive personality of this is how I'm used to create in my relationships, codependent, abusive, whatever that is, to turn to, yeah, I'm going to walk through that so I can, and then create what we want to create, right?
Yeah.
A unconditional, loving relationship that is supportive and full of life and adventure, that there is an understanding of growing edge that comes into the mix of relationship as well, and that there's an open and clear communication that gets to happen in relationship. I just spoke into what I want because I'm single right now. So I'm grateful for you for holding space for me to say
Mm.
with clarity of like, and we get to do that all the time because the universe is listening. God's
Yeah.
listening, spirit's listening. When we take a clear shot into the universe and say, this is what I'm intending. And then what you just said, surrender, like let go and trust that it's all going to come through. But that's where the uncharted is.
Yeah.
That's where the unknown is. We don't know how this is going to come back to us, but there's a trust that it'll come back to us better than we can ever have just intended.
Yeah. And this is, you and I had a conversation recently about my daughter. And one of the things we've been talking to her about is, do you trust in God or the universe or source or, whatever feels good to you to call it? It's kind of like a trust fall, right? When you like lay back and you like trust that somebody's going to catch you, right?
Love those.
Yeah. And I said, if you did that right now, would you trust that I would catch you? She's like, yes. And I'm like, okay, well, it's the same thing with spirit, right? So I had picked her up from school one day and we were driving through downtown and there's a little bakery and she's like, can I go in there and get a cookie? And she's about to be 12. And I was like, yes, here's $10, but there's nowhere to park. So if I can like let you out right here and I'll park like just a block away and come meet you, then yes, that's okay. And immediately she started breaking down and was like so scared that like if she got out of the car right now, something was going to happen to her. And so I used this example like in hindsight and I was like, do you remember that day? Do you think that you trusted that the divine was going to take care of you then? And she's like wanting to say yes, but she knows that that's not what happened. And it's just, this is where our fear comes from, which I think it's normal to have a dose of fear. We are human beings at the same time. And this is also what pushes us through and navigates us through life. But that trust, even if it's just trusting that you can walk across the street without a car hitting you, right? Or leaving your car unlocked while you run into the store real quick and it's not going to be stolen. But all these people that typically are like triple locking their car, making sure nobody steals it, or like even you not wearing your seatbelt half the time, you trust.
Hey, is this out for public? Don't put me on blast with the authorities. I'm
Oh,
just
I'm
kidding.
not putting you on blast.
I'm just kidding.
Let's just add your license plate too. Cheers.
Cheers to that. I do trust. In a lot of areas of my life, I trust. And what I love, what I hear about that situation with your daughter is that you also had an opportunity to come back and ask. So she's in a safe moment, like a safe place to review that, right? And you
Right.
said, oh, she said, of course she wants to trust. And of course, there was some trust happening in that aspect, even though there was anxiety and tears and all of that worked itself out. So what wins? The trust. Even though our mind may not let us do it, our hearts are still going to go get that cookie. So, and what's really good, Sari, is I'm really happy that you are raising two beautiful children
Mm.
and that you have these moments with them to just ask from curiosity. Hey, right? So really powerful. You're a beautiful mom. Beautiful mom.
Mm,
I appreciate all the shares that you've done off camera and what you did here.
yeah.
Now we're gonna
Thank
have to
you.
get her permission to see if we can put her on the show.
I think that she would secretly love that and be mortified at the same time.
Mm, super cool.
But yeah, like, and I think too, like, if you are not surrounding yourself with people, like, even, you and I hadn't really talked in a little while. We got to catch up recently, but like having people like you in my life that, I think you and I even trigger each other sometimes because we're such a mirror reflection sometimes of ourselves. But like how beautiful that is to have me be able to like walk away from a conversation and question, like, okay, where am I seeing myself in this?
Mm,
And if we are not surrounding ourselves with people that are constantly like challenging the very fabric of who we are, it's hard to open yourself up and to let these feelings of higher love and what that looks like and feels like in your life.
I love what you're sharing. We did take a little bit of break, and I know that we had some growing. I had some growing to do. What I do know for sure is, I'm pretty sure after reviewing it, looking back, I was going through a dark night of the soul for probably 6 to 8 months. And if people don't know what dark night of the soul, it's like if you're all aligned with spirit and that's how you sort of move with life, just imagine a feeling of like it's not there. And so what I was able to do was lean into my practices. Like I meditated every day. Were they great? No. I mean, great? No. But what I love, what happened in the course, and this is why I know we are connected again at this moment, because I healed something inside of me. I'm really
Mm,
clear. And what I did back in the summer of 20, I took on a teaching that Reverend Michael had. It just really resonated with me. And he was up on the pulpit at Agape, and he said, create an atmosphere of acceptance, just accepting everything that comes my way and accepting everything that's coming out of me. And then what I really loved about him is that in a few sentences after that, he said, and you don't have to agree with everything coming your way.
mm,
You can accept it because it's in front of you.
yeah.
And yet you don't have to agree with that information that's coming to you, whether it's from a person or from, a reading or whatever.
Yeah. And I'm
And
glad you
go ahead.
touched on that because I was ready to dig on that. um, but yeah, I think that right, because acceptance doesn't mean that you have to be like 100% okay with how it's going. And I mean, that's like saying, for example, I had a course that I offered here recently, and it didn't fill to like the magnitude that I wanted it to, but it did have people come in. And I had done this huge event up to it, and I didn't want to accept that like this was I put all this hard work into it and this is what I get. But what I do get to accept is looking back and reflecting and seeing how it went and accepting that like I'm a different person and there were so many things that I learned, even that you're speaking into, that came out of you that needed to, right? And just accepting it, and that now there's this evolved version of ourselves that I think I'm sure both of us are grateful for those experiences because we wouldn't be who we are right now.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that Sari, this is why we're two peas in a pod.
I
We
know I
didn't
love
we
you.
come off of the same plant, all of that stuff, because we have a lot. First of all, both of us are spicy, really big energies too. And so we have this like, let me just speak from the I. I'm not gonna
It's
even
okay.
though we are still two peas in a pod, I'm gonna say for this I have really big energy. I've had lots of experiences throughout my entire life of being seen with thousands of people with their eyes on me. So you can imagine what I had to heal when I am now doing one-on-one counseling. I am doing what I had to heal was a performing personality, which kept me separate from that audience. And now I'm losing my track. But what I'm
Could I
loving it, go
can
ahead.
I just add in that
Yeah.
Danny was like a super famous kid jump roper, and I just had to throw that in
Thank you.
there.
Yeah. Super famous. Super famous. Yeah. Just on, news magazines that were national way back in the 70s, right? So, I'm dating myself now. I know I look a lot younger
You
than what I
do.
am. Anyway, but that was God giving me, because that was the first uncharted aspect of my life that I had no idea. All I knew is I loved jump roping, and that's
And
it.
how childlike that is, though, like,
Right. It's very joyful. It's
yeah, but
very
even like just taking a beat from that of like, even as a child, you just love to fucking jump rope. And then it ended up being like this national sensation. But like, even taking a piece of that into our lives of like, what just like is fun to do, and like just doing it just because, and because your inner child wants to fucking have fun.
exactly. That's it. And I think that's also where we connect very well, is in our childlike nature. And there's a difference between being childlike and childish. And that's a fine line for me, right? Like I can hop off on a childish, and that's where my wobble comes in with relationships sometimes. And childlike is that innocence. And we can hold that innocence even in the midst of all the experiences we've had up until now, right? So
Yeah.
thank you for interjecting and moving on to a different subject because of my jump roping. But what and
Going back
you know,
to
I'm just going to put
your,
this out here. And
okay.
this girl was a dancer, like big performer dancing. So just saying.
I did go take class even this weekend, and I was very surprised by my body still being in tune to like that muscle memory,
Yeah.
and I'm grateful that I have a body that still moves like that.
Yeah. Did you put your
And it was
hair up?
fun.
Did you put your hair up, or did you let all of
No,
those
it
locks
swung.
flow?
It totally swung.
It totally swung. I could totally
Yeah.
see you doing it. Like getting the helicopter look going on when you're
Oh
turning
yeah.
around. I love it. So
Okay.
good.
Going
Oh,
back to like,
sorry.
here we are already playing. And our childlikeness.
Mhm.
Okay, going back to what we're talking about. There's an A word you were talking about.
Acceptance.
Acceptance. There it
Yeah.
is. So what do you feel like was the hardest part of you, that it's so easy for us to push like the dark parses pieces away, and instead just really loving and accepting them? What do you feel like in this past year that like that really stirred up for you?
It's funny because you brought this up in our conversation already. It's sort of like not trusting the unknown and needing to control a way that I was feeling or thinking, or how I was interpreting information coming in with all of my filters. So that was my biggest challenge. And when I created this atmosphere acceptance, there was a lot more clarity of like, oh, this is your growing edge. This is what you're working on. Taking responsibility of how I was filtering information. And what it's given me also is much more clarity and a willingness to go in a kind and loving way. What did you mean by that? Or, ask the question of like, could you tell me this? Because this is how I'm interpreting it. And typically I won't even say this is how I'm interpreting it. It's just asking, I'm understanding, like I'm willing to talk about it to a point where a loving kindness comes through. Now, again, I
Mm,
can still be in loving kindness and accept somebody and still not agree with whatever they're suggesting or whatever they're saying.
right. And
And I
having
used to
that
be a really
discernment.
big person, like, I don't agree. And now it's like softened a lot because I'm listening now to it's my intention to be in acceptance and also be in love.
Yeah. I love
And when
that. And I
I
think that's, go ahead.
Well, and when I know that there's something I could have done better, I have the review. So the next time that opportunity arises, it's there. And then
Yeah.
what I know about healing around especially this is that spirit's going to bring it back to you to see where you're at.
And test you. See if you're still doing it.
Test, yes. For me, it's about healing, because something that activated me a year ago is not going to have me here,
Well, it's
because
almost
now.
gauging as to where you're at now, right? Maybe test isn't
Exactly.
the right word. But
And
I think, and even, yeah, I think that that's constantly showing up for us, right? And I always say it's really the same story. It's just showing up in a different costume, being sneaky as fuck and seeing if you still react ultimately.
yeah, and ultimately, it's the same kind of energy. So even underneath the story, the same energy that's flowing out of the body temple, or it's not the experience really. It's the energy the chemicalization that we as humans like to create. Now, we're more than just our humanness, right? We are beings. So as I have learned to tap into the energy of things, well, let me back up. This is what I tell a lot of people. We are light, mostly invisible light. It comes into this plane of existence, of separation, as an electromagnetic field. That's the science of it. But that's also the invisible light. That is coming through first, even before anything becomes manifest on this planet, or through us, or all of that. So if I think of myself as a movie projector, I am light moving through filters out onto this experience. I'm not a person that is in a movie having to bob and weave and do this. If I know that I'm the light projecting everything out into this experience, then I'm empowered. I
Right.
can choose love.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that something comes to me that could be fearful, that I never really thought I would create, but I did. Created it all.
Right. Well, and it's almost like too, like that filter shows up, like when you think of like a clear filter versus like a slightly hued filter right next to it. You can't really tell the difference, but there's a difference. And then that filter all of a sudden comes through, and now you're living through a different filter and you didn't even realize it fucking happened, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And so just getting, I think, more clear, more aligned into what does that feeling feel like when it feels expansive and it feels real and it feels free versus, and I do think that, we are humans. Like, I do think we came here to have a human experience and to
Mhm,
have ups and to have those dark nights of the soul
mhm.
and to have fucking radiant, joyful, let's play in the grass, days as well. But, I think the more that we're aware of when they start kind of changing, even just slightly, like that's when we are truly in control, I feel like, of our state of being and who we want to be. But it's not
That's it.
always easy.
It's not always easy. And even in the not easiness, for me, and I know I've witnessed you in the midst of challenges, that I've built a muscle of gratitude. I can have it even in the midst of challenge. So my feeling tone is practiced. In the middle of dark night of my soul for 6 months, I still was experiencing gratitude.
Right. Well,
So,
and I mean, because even if you're in the dark night of your soul, you still have a roof over your head. You still get to take a warm bath. You still get to eat food every day, right? Even though that, like, there's a lot of shit that's happening.
and I know, because of my experiences with dark nights, is that I come out on the other end much clearer. It's never comfortable, but I also know that everything is for me, because I know that God is good. God is not good and bad. God is only good. So whatever is coming through my experience is for me. It's not against me. It's for me. So if I'm willing to sit in the mud, in the dark, and know that whatever is being planted in me is going to grow powerfully. And it's never easy in those
Yeah.
moments. And then there's lots of moments that are like, whoa, whoa, I think I'm going to go fly.
Totally. And I love those. I love
Yeah.
those. But, and I think too, even as you're speaking, like I'm just even recognizing things in my own life that like the idea of like it's working for you, right? A lot of times when we're in those dark nights, we can't see why or how it's working for us. But then when we get on the other side and we're like evolved and changed and feeling good and like, oh, I had to go through that, right? Like that is that it's working for me. Like I had to spend 12 years in massive chronic anxiety to be where I'm at having this podcast with you right now.
Yes. That's it. That's it. And I believe as we continue to evolve and grow and unfold, and we are very much, as you've said, aware, and I say conscious of these cycles, these experiences, all of that stuff. When we have more awareness on it, then there's a little bit more freedom that plays into all of our life. Just to make full circle, because we've talked about freedom a couple of times, Reverend Michael just recently said, and I am complete agreement, and it's my personal experience. I was addicted, so I was wanting to get high, and I was not woke then. I got the new high because that's the only thing I could define the spiritual high that I was experiencing when I went to my spiritual center. And Reverend Michael last week on the pulpit says, we're not here to get high, we're here to get free.
Mm.
And that really resonated with me. It's like, okay, freedom is a quality of spirit. It's our nature.
It is.
And so the high, that's so to get free instead of high.
Absolutely. And I had a breath work session probably about a year and a half ago. And the vision that came to me during that time was that I was this bright blue butterfly and I was in a glass cage and it felt very constricted. And I felt like I just wanted to be free and I couldn't. And I could see everything and I could see all the freedom around me, but like I couldn't have it. And that was like whatever I was needing to experience at that time, representing what was going on in my life. And then here recently at a retreat, like in a meditation, this blue butterfly came back to me, but she wasn't in the glass cage. And she was like, let's fucking go. Like, we're here. This is the freedom. And, it took a year and a half for that to like really come full circle. Right. And that these are also just processes. Like, what we think we want or need, like, isn't going to show up tomorrow. It's a hell of a possibility. But like, sometimes what we need to like mull through in order to really be grateful and feel and really tune into that freedom and liberation, like sometimes takes time. And like just being like kind with ourselves and what that freedom is going to be and when it's going to show up, and like how fucking amazing it felt to feel the freedom of that butterfly in my body.
Well, and how beautiful it is that you had the same symbolism show up in different ways for you to be in this now moment of, a free butterfly, beautiful butterfly flying all over the place. I love that. It's powerful when we're aware enough to pick up the little inflection points on our path. And you just shared
And
two of them.
well, and even, within that year and a half, I'm sure there were pieces of freedom that I experienced, right? But like they were just kind of like the stepping stones on the journey into the bigger piece of freedom. That being that my family is deciding to move and have this new freedom and environment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It just and just trusting, right? That butterfly or whatever imagery or symbolism that like you even associate with is going to show up for you, and trusting that it will.
Yes. Better than you could ever imagine. And I love your 3D move. I'm excited for you to be able to spread your wings in a new space and place that will support all of your creation, all of your creativity, and all of your family's creativity. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like acceptance and freedom And, I feel like that even goes hand in hand, right? Of like when you can actually start, acceptance kind of feels like the opposite of resistance. And like to me, acceptance just is not like, I wouldn't say it's not giving up, but it's just kind of like throwing the hands down of like, here it is, just loving it no matter fucking what. And that ultimately gives us freedom.
Yes. Loving it no matter fucking what. And a caveat to that too is like whatever you're going through in the moment, acknowledge it and allow love to be present at the same time. Right? So I love that you're saying that. Love it no matter what. And I also heard that you are also very much aware of whatever is moving through you is to be loved on. Powerful.
Yeah. So
A lot
maybe
of
for
people don't
someone's,
get that, Sari. A lot of people are wanting to push the bad feelings away.
absolutely.
And living in the moment in love lets that atmosphere of acceptance and freedom to be very present, even in the midst of whatever you're walking on your path with.
Yeah. And I mean, some days that's easier said than done,
For
right?
sure. For sure.
And so I was going to say, for someone maybe listening who's really jiving with what we're saying, but like, could you give like a specific example of something that like didn't feel good that you didn't want to accept and what loving that might look like?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, for sure. And I'm going to go all the way back to my latest awakening. It was my partner of 14 years transitioned in a hospital accident. His name was Richard, and the pain was so great. And I was not woke then, for sure. And even in the night that he passed, that pain pushed me into very weird things happening. His voice was very present. He was nudging me. He was telling me that everything was going to be okay. All of this stuff was coming in his voice in my head.
Mm.
So I want to make sure I'm answering your question. Ask it again so I can make sure I word this greatly.
So when the things come up that you don't want to accept, that don't feel good,
Mm-hmm.
how do you love it anyways?
Well, in this particular thing, I wasn't woke. I was having a lot of experience, but I loved him. And the love that we shared together was very, very present. But did I want him to leave the planet? Absolutely not. And I found agape about a month before for other reasons. Like it was addiction issues and all that stuff and how I was handling that. And that's a whole nother podcast. So we can talk about that when you're ready.
Oh yeah.
And in this push of pain, I can't tell you what happened, but I can tell you I have very clear memory when I really confirmed that he was no longer here, meaning I got myself to the hospital because I wasn't there. I witnessed a bunch of neural pathways in my brain like explode and leave and other places.
Mm.
So it caused a lot of confusion, a lot of pain. So what I did with the teachings with agape and that experience was I was being told that I'm creating everything. And so even his passing was my creation. Now I'll call it a
Mm.
co-creation, but I was part of it from a cellular level. And when I say cellular level, the agreement that Richard and I made became very clear in the moments of his transition. And oh my gosh, he just came in. So I have these other ways of being. So I had to accept that I created this for my own good and unfoldment. So the story that week before we went to a No Doubt concert, we got backstage, we got to meet everybody, we did all of that stuff because of his connections of being a teacher and knowing, the father of the drummer. Anyway, that was just a little caveat for people interested in No Doubt. He told me very lovingly, and I heard it very deeply, that he said, I wish you were the guy that I met because I went down a path of addiction and just a bunch of dark stuff. And he was loving me the entire time. And he said that. And I said, I'm going into rehab then. As soon as your back surgery is done, I will go into rehab. And I never had that opportunity.
Mhm.
But what I can tell you today is that I am even more in the time and space of things. I'm more than he would ever have thought I would be. I healed myself from all of the things that he was concerned about. So what I do know is he's been on my shoulder. I created this acceptance. This is a major life one. And there's
Yeah.
lots of little ones in the midst of that, right? Like if you think of the flower of life, that was the big round one and then there's all these other really great things. But I say that for people can feel into that when people leave transition, and it affected me deeply. So much so that when people transition now, I'm very available to the energies of them in the invisible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story, sweet being, is the pain that pushed me into a vision, the pain that I had to accept. I created this. I'm not victim to it,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's, I know you've done a ton of work on all of that to be where you're at now.
Mhm.
But, I just want to also give voice to that is so heavy, on a human being, human being the earthlings that we are came to this, right? Not at that soul level, but at this experience to accept that you had a hand in this creation
Mhm.
and that what that can do to a person, right? I mean, like you said, you didn't play into the victim, you started getting your life together, but like how that could really just throw someone further, right? And obviously that could be their own journey as well, but how huge in that acceptance of your role in the life that you're living, right? That soul contract that was made that you had to experience this to be the light being that you are now,
Mhm.
living in the human form.
Yeah. It's super interesting. You know, and in all of this growth and unfoldment, I can turn back to my life, even, beginning with my jump roping career and all the great things I did as a young kid, and then all the darkness that I went through. That light being that you're talking about, I can see that being in everything that I walk through. And so I remember this when I'm sitting in front of clients, when they're moving through something. It may not be exactly what I'm moving through, but what I do know is that I know that they're a light being. I know that they have come down here as human to experience something for their own cellular um, unfoldment, cellular expression. I do know for certain that our souls are in the celebration realm, in the unconditional love realm, always. And when we tap into that part of us, all the rest of us we can do. We can be in the doing this because we're in all of who we are. Does that resonate? And
Yeah.
and and that's
Oh yeah.
why 11 years ago after Richard transitioned, would I be a friend of yours? No. I had to go through all the things, and you had to go through all of your things for us to like
Yes.
miraculously come stick together and go, I think we'll do the rest of our life this way. And we'll
Mhm.
support each other in our growth and unfoldment. And we'll allow this kind of relationship to be what is normal. And
Hell
I and
yes.
you get to be a demonstration of this. And we're not into the gossip world. We're not going to be into the things that are so prevalent around the outside, and yet we're here to bring love. We're here to bring peace unconditionally, beyond human understanding. And when we know that, then the circumstances that catch us, we go, okay, I'm working with that. It's not him or her, it's me. I'm
Yeah.
taking responsibility.
And I love that. And I love that, there could have been so many misses, right? For even you and I to connect and the world, the journey that we've traveled.
Pretty clear that we were supposed to meet.
But yeah, like both of us having to go through each of our thing to connect and to be here. And it makes me feel so good. Another friend said to me the other day, and I think of this with you as well, of like, if people like you are coming into my life, then I'm doing something right. And that feels good. And even for me, like a lot of what's been coming up for me the past few months have just been this like, I love really big. And I love that I love really big, but not everybody can love that way. And there was a lot of people that I had attracted into my life that were just vampires of that energy. And having to really look at like, what am I doing that's creating these vampires showing up into my life versus having people such as yourself that is not a vampire and just is and receives and gives love all at the same time. And you always say like, turn the mirror around. Like if you're seeing something in somebody else, like there's something in you that's doing the same thing. And the more that I continue unraveling that, the more people like you are showing up in my life. So,
And I've grown since our conversation around put the mirror in there. Yes, this is true. It's a reflective universe. And if we have a self-contemplation, or we're really interested in being unconditional love, then it may be something around, what is this asking me to be in this moment? And sometimes that's clarity and saying bye-bye for now.
yeah,
I send off with, and I'm really clear that I can say goodbye to you.
right. Well, and even, this is what I teach most of the women that I work with is to use that voice when it is obvious that the relationship and whatever form or fashion it might be, that if it is not doing anything for you, to not just sit in that shit, but to like say like, I love myself enough to like walk away from this.
Yes.
And that it has nothing to do with them and who they are. It's about how you're loving yourself.
Well, you're talking about that surrender that you brought at the very beginning. It's like, I'm going to surrender to what feels good and what feels aligned to me. And I'm willing to let go of anything on the outside that's not serving this vision. Not to get too personal, but you're moving because of your
Yes.
example of what you teach move through you.
Yeah.
And now people are going to be really curious. So you're going to have your husband on the show.
I'm sure he will. He's
But
kind of, that seed has been planted.
okay, good. Because he would be a brilliant guest. And what I'm alluding to, everybody, is exactly what you were teaching for yourself. Listen to that inner voice and say, you're going to do this no matter what, because the inner voice is saying, go to Austin.
Right.
Now that's 3D. It's the actual energy that's saying, I'm creating a community in a new spot, and I picked this place.
Yeah.
Glad your family's coming with you.
Me too. They're kind of important.
Kind of amazing.
Well, we could just sit here and go on forever and ever,
Well,
but that
have
just
me
means
back.
there'll be 5 more podcasts or something in the mix.
Cool.
So, obviously, Danny is a wonderful friend, spiritual facilitator, coach, so many little other things sprinkled in there. If you're curious, how can anyone who's interested contact you?
So super easy. I have a website. It's Danny Parizek. So if you look at my name in this video, you can see how my last name is spelled, but I'll do it right now. It's Danny, P as in Paul, Arizek. And through there is email links and all of that good stuff. Also, if you know Sari's number, she'll put you in contact with me as well. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm serious.
I just dish it out. What do you mean?
I appreciate that.
It's like the cards on the ground in Vegas.
So that's the easiest way to contact me. I am also in service at Agape University. That's out of Los Angeles. So if you go to agapelive.com for any of the classes that are being offered, I'm typically a support facilitator in those. If you're really interested in knowing how empowered you are and in knowing that you are creating your life, this is a mystical teaching, which is very similar to where we met with Dr. Joe. I'm available through there, and the university can put me in contact with you too. So either one of those resonate with you. I'm very, very grateful. I'm also here in Colorado. So I guess the last thing I would say is like I work, I give a gift every Friday night. It's sound healing through alchemy sound bowls and the sound bath. And before that class, I do teach breath yoga. I'm trained in several different modalities, and right now we're working with elemental breath this year. So it's a very powerful transformational kind of breath that allows you to start opening up to that inner child that we were talking about.
Mm,
Super great.
I love that.
Rocky Mountain
Sounds like we
Pilates
all
and
need it
yoga.
too.
That's where I'm at here in Colorado.
Well, beautiful. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us and listening. And I'm sure Danny will be back with us multiple times. And I love you.
I
Grateful to
love you,
have you
Sari.
here.
Thank you for your gifts in this world. And thank you for just working through your inspiration and all the things that you produce for this plane of existence. It will not go. And the butterfly effect is happening because you said yes. Thank you.
So hopefully you guys will all say yes to this episode and the next coming. So see you till next time.